And Tyler, how close is too close, and how far back is too far back?
I would say don't get too close,
Oh, too
but
close like this.
yeah,
That's a good spot.
but I
I'll
can,
mention that at the beginning that we've asked you to stay in an area, so especially for the audience, so they know why, because I know you probably would prefer to.
I would
Walk and
prefer to walk
mingle,
the
but
route, but
We're going to restrict you,
Yep.
so we'll excuse that on the front end. You have people logging in?
yeah, I've already got them in. So
Good. Wait maybe a minute or two. People can drift in. We have people online, so I will start us. Am I okay over here? Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Watertown School Board, I would like to welcome you to tonight's candidate meet and greet session. And in a few minutes, we will be welcoming Dr. Jared Burke, and you'll learn more about Dr. Burke himself, as also his career and his interest in Watertown. I welcome you that are in our audience tonight, as well as our participants who are joining us by Zoom. And I would like to encourage you to ask questions. You'll ask questions by writing them on the cards that are on your table, or by using the chat room feature that's on your Zoom screen. And we will try our best to ask all questions. I'll collect cards and collect the questions from the chat as they come in. And that will allow me to maybe organize them a little bit, put them in categories, and sometimes help if there are any duplicates. There will not be any names read from the cards or from the screens on Zoom. And at the last forum, at the end, I turned the cards over to an attending board person so that they would know that all questions had been asked and they would have a record of those questions. Let's see, I'm Pat Neudecker. I work for Hazard Young and Atia. We've been very fortunate to be working with this great school board who's trying to hire their next superintendent for your community. And we're excited to work with them, and we wish you well. We feel you have excellent candidates to learn about and to choose from. We'll probably take about 45 minutes to let our candidate talk and ask for you to ask questions. And after that, we'll take a short few minutes for Dr. Burke to wrap things up for us and summarize. And then if you'd like to stay and mingle a few minutes, you're certainly welcome to do that. But all in all, we should be here for about an hour. And yes, it probably still will be raining when we leave, so that's okay. But anyway, we thank you very, very much. This is the last of our 3 finalists. The board will be meeting sometime next week as they begin their deliberations and hopefully are able to offer a contract to a new candidate to begin this summer. And thank you, Tyler, for all your help. This is helpful, Tyler, always dependable, more than steady Eddie, right? Just always there for us. So thank you so much for your help too. I think that's all I have to say for an introduction and a welcome. So I'm going to ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Jared Burke, and we'll turn things over to you to go ahead and introduce yourself. Welcome.
Well, thank you everybody for showing up, and those of you who are online. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come and have a forum with you to talk a little bit about me as a possible superintendent candidate, but also to talk a little bit more about you as a school district. And wondering if that's going to be something that's going to be a good marriage for us. So with that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a current 7-year superintendent in the Richland School District. Just completed our 7th year there. It's been a great experience. It's my first superintendency and a really large growth time for me in my career. During that time, I also finished or completed my doctorate through Edgewood University, or Edgewood College in Madison. Prior to that, I was the director of instruction in Mount Horeb Area School District for 8 years. And I got my master's degree in curriculum instruction and school leadership through Marion College in Fond du Lac. Before Mount Horeb, I was a principal and director of curriculum instruction in the Southwestern School District. Very small K-12 school district, 750 students approximately at the time I was there. And at that point in time, I was the elementary middle school principal, and had a great experience there. And prior to that, I was a middle school principal, or excuse me, a elementary teacher and middle school teacher. I taught mostly science and social studies, but was a AGR or SAGE, I was SAGE classroom reduction teacher when I was an elementary teacher. So that tells you a little bit about me. I have been married for 24 years now to my wife, Melissa. We have 2 children, Ryan, who is going into 6th grade next year, and Declan, who's going into 2nd grade next year. So that's a little bit about us. And we are really excited about the opportunity to possibly be here in the district. It's a great opportunity for our children. That's one of the things that I'm looking for, is looking for a place where I can have some expanded opportunities for our children. We are citizens of the world. We love to do world travel and take our children places. And one of the things that I like about this place is I grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And so I'm used to a little bit bigger town vibe. And I also know that this is a good traveling distance between Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago, and it's just a really great hub. With that, I also like a lot of the opportunities that this community has. So, I mean, it's a large enough community, but a small enough community where you still know everybody. And I think that that's going to be a really good fit for my family and I.
Super. Perhaps you could tell us some of the highlights of your day. And I'm going to mention, I think you know this from other candidates, but we've asked Jared to kind of stay put in a geographic area there so that we can keep him on camera. Otherwise, I'm sure he'd like to mingle with you and get a little closer. But perhaps we know that you've been here all day and you've had a great visit. Tell us a little bit about it and perhaps the highlights of your day.
Yeah. Oh boy, I don't know where to start. I mean, you know, a day like this is a whirlwind. When you're meeting all the people of the central office and then all the administration and out in the building, staff, students. One of the highlights of the day was, because it was the last day of school, there were many treats abounding. And so wonderful opportunities to touch base with the kids and, you know, get a cupcake here or a cookie there. And so as a person who really loves food, that was something that excited me and was able to talk with them. But just what struck me, I think, is the wealth of opportunities that the families here in Watertown have through the public school system. It's just amazing what you've been able to do. And it's inspired me to think of even what else could we do? What else could we achieve in the school district? You know, we traveled out to Lebanon and I saw the program out there. And we talked a little bit about, how that is a neatly situated little school out in the country. And we still have near Watertown a number of family farms. And, a great ag program, hired 2 ag teachers in a high school this size. It's amazing, that resource. And, could we use that resource out in Lebanon even to really grow that program out there and try to get more students if we're going to keep that facility open. And I know that there has been some commitment made to keep it open for a little bit longer to see if we can grow enrollment out there. And it led to a lot of big conversations about, that property and all the properties within the school district, the uniqueness of each of the elementaries. One thing that I really noticed traveling through each of the schools, especially the elementaries, is a sense of community that is at each building. It's a little different at each of the buildings, but the total commitment that the students and staff have together was really apparent even on the last day of school, and that the kids were really tied to that. So those are some of the really neat things that I noticed. I could go on and on, but we only have 45 minutes. So
great. Well, I'm going to start with the questions. So
okay.
In no particular order. The first one is about board relations and governance. If you and the board could not reach an agreement, how would you proceed? Yeah, so first of all, I do take some good ownership in that
I'm hired to do a specific job, and that's to be the educational leader for this region. And although I have that and I have a lot of schooling and a lot of experience, it doesn't mean I have all the answers. So I am open-minded, and if we don't agree, then that just tells me that there's more conversation that needs to happen until we do, because that's our job. Our job is to lead the school district. And if there's not agreement, and what I mean by agreement is, some consensus by the board to show a leadership action, right? So the controlling majority of the board has to say, yes, this is the direction we want to go in. That may be in the direction that the administration is leading, but it may be in a different direction. And if it is, then I follow the direction of the board at that time, and we go in that direction. But hopefully, being the person that they hired and looking at that, and our administrative team who the prior superintendent and myself would manage and hire, would be looking at how can we work together to find a way to get into the same or right direction. And I'm willing to look at all pathways, but if there's an impasse, it's probably because we probably just aren't done with the conversation. And so looking at ways where we can try to find more answers, get more data, survey more people, talk through the issue, I think we'll get there in the end. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Next one about our teachers. How would you foster teacher retention?
Okay. So for me, retention is a part of it. I think to get retention, we have to, have recognition of the good things that people are doing, because we have people, staff, not just teachers, but all staff, do such wonderful things for our kids each day. And I share this with my staff, especially the new staff that we hire every year. We take charge of our family's most valuable possession, right? I don't know any parent, I'm one of them, who wouldn't give my house, my car, any money I have, all of me to protect my kid and to give my kid what would help set them up for a better future. And so when we're interacting with our students, we have to keep that in mind. And when people do keep that in mind, they go the extra mile, and we need to recognize that. Okay. Along with recognizing them, we need to reinvest in them. Okay. And reinvestment might come in the form of salary and benefits and those kinds of things. And I'm sure that, they're appreciative, just like I am, of anything that comes their way, because let's face it, you can't just pay the rent with gold star stickers. Even though recognition is good, the gold star sticker is good, you can't pay your rent with a gold star sticker. So we have to reinvest in them, not only just in salary or benefits. We have to reinvest in them with professional development, education, caring for all of those things that we can do to make sure that our people feel like they belong to us as a community, because they will then go the extra mile. And so after reinvestment and recognition, I think that those things do lead to retention. Yeah. So I also like to put the other fourth four in there, which is rehirement. When we have good people who retire, the longer we can keep hold of them, and the longer we can keep them mentoring the new that come in. If we've got a good culture and they're part of that culture, when they choose to leave us, if we can find any way to keep them invested in our school system and to keep them working towards and working with our other staff members, that's better, because it just hands down the tradition of what makes us us. So I also look at our rehirement. Are you still able to give of your time, efforts, and talents? Because we put a lot of money, funds, efforts, recognition into them along their career. And if they're still willing, let's find a way to have them here in any kind of capacity.
Thank you.
Yep.
How do you approach, what are your thoughts on voucher, charter, and open enrollment?
Okay. Voucher, charter, and open enrollment. I will tell you that I am probably one of fewer people in public school and administration that actually support school choice. And I know it's weird to say that, being a public school person, but I believe it's our job to educate students. That's my job then as the district administrator to work with all of those other choice programs, right? And to offer the benefits of the public school to them, whether it's a private or a voucher or a charter area, to say we do have resources and they come through tax dollars. Now, don't get me wrong, I still see the competition in that. And I still think that we need to do everything we can to be the first choice in education. And most public schools are the first choice for students in their area. And I'll do everything I can to do that. And I'll do that trying to form community, not to form divide. Because I do think that if what we're offering is a good product, we will have students. And if it's not, I want the families to get what they need. And hopefully we can still work with the place that they need to offer the supports, to offer what they need. And hopefully we can keep that connection. And eventually those students will come back to us. So again, I'm not afraid of school choice. I'm a little leery about how our state's looking to fund it. And that's a whole different conversation, but the choice in itself, I think, is a good thing.
Great, thank you. What is and what should be the role of technology in the classroom?
I think the role of technology in a classroom, it's a foregone conclusion. There's technology in everything. I mean, people are starting to buy thermostats for their houses now that they can control from their cell phone. So I think it is what it's always been. Technology, the pencil is technology, it's a tool, right? We need to make sure that we harness all the tools that we can to help have our students be successful. And I think we need to stay at pace, if not ahead of pace, because it's really one of the next issues that is going to bring challenges. And when I mean challenges, I mean equitable challenges to students. If our students don't have access to broadband, which means in their evenings and weekends and everything else, that they have the ability to enter into chat rooms or to, submit homework assignments or be synchronous instead of asynchronous with their learning, that's going to be a problem. And the reason that's going to be a problem is because other communities have that for their students. All right, and if their students are used to using that tool and they are well versed in that tool and they go on to the next step in their educational process, having that experience, it's really hard to travel about a community if you don't know how to drive a car real well. But if you're a very good user of a car and you've done a lot of driving and you can get around with a navigation system and everything else, it makes driving in a big city really easy. And those are the differences that some of our kids do face, whether it's on a personal issue within their family and the ability to have those resources, or it's a community-wide resource that we're talking about. But I do think that our students need access to those tools, and we need to stay at pace with them.
Okay, thank you. Talk about communication. How would you communicate out to parents and the community?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that I, as well as the community, can communicate out. And you will find that I do that in many ways, whether it's through local news sources, newspaper, radio stations, news stations, those kinds of things on bigger topics, district-wide newsletters, a short email out to staff or parents. Just want you to know that this is happening this evening, or having to make sure and ensure that that communication is being done by the district in some fashion, even if it doesn't come from me. If it's coming from the district, it's going to have that same voice. So having all of those communications. One of the biggest pieces of communication that I think is the most important, though, is how we communicate at the board level. Because those are probably some of the most public places, even if people aren't in attendance, where they get information, because nowadays most of those are televised, right? Recorded, Zoomed, whatever. And how people see administration and the board interact and solve problems and work for them as a people is really important. And so that is a communication that I really try to stay in touch with and discuss with the board, our other administration who end up speaking at those places and other things. So also this forum, I mean, this is a great first start to trying to do that. So.
And I'm going to piggyback another question onto that. Do you feel parents should have a say in their child's education?
Oh, absolutely. I will go a step further. Not only just parents, we have to remember that a good part of our community and our electorate don't even have students in the school, but they still care about students in the school and they care about education. And so not only looking at our parents and what they have to say about education and what they would like to see happen with their son or daughter's education, but also hearing from the community about where they think communication should go. They put a lot of good resources through tax dollars and other investments. When I mean that, school districts get so many donations from not only people as citizens, but businesses and so on. And they care. And so we have to listen to them and we have to think, well, what is it that we can do to work together to have the best product we can for our students?
Let's shift to those students. How do you approach school discipline?
So how do I approach school discipline? I am I'm a big fan of restorative justice. I'm a big fan of every time you make a choice, choices come with consequences, both good and bad. So make a good choice. And it's a learning experience for everyone. And I know that there are some learning experiences that come with consequences that are hard to recover from. And sometimes that's the reality of us as a society. So, would I and have I needed to expel a child from school? Yes. Most of the time when that happens, you'll see me ask the school board for a way to early reinstate the student back. But I use that as an opportunity to be able to apply things to the student through a mutual agreement with the families to get some more further supports or help that they need. For instance, if a child is found having drugs in the school or something and they're going through an expulsion, well, I want to get them back into education real quickly because I don't want them to be just hanging out about the house and maybe get more into drugs. But what I do want to do is I want to make sure that they get the proper AODA counseling and other things so that we can keep an eye on them as a student and give them the supports they need. Check in with some kind of counseling program or other things. And we can mandate those through early reinstatement agreement. So I do believe that discipline is a learning process, and it's our job to create structures within that can support students.
Could you take a minute too to describe restorative justice?
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
you mean by that?
Yep.
Please?
So what I mean by that
Okay.
is, and I will talk by way of example. Okay. My first job out of college was in Reno, Nevada. And I worked at a very small neighborhood inner city school. It had about 120 kids in 7th and 8th grade. But within that community, it was a very diverse population and heavily gang involved students. So a lot of times we would have students who would come by on the weekend and maybe do some tagging art on the building, right? Well, when we found out, who may have done that, first of all, we wanted to make sure that the art came down. And then we said, if you are interested in beautifying the school, then why don't you spend a couple of days on the trainer re-beautification project? We got them a vest so that they wouldn't get hit by a car, but we got them in the car and they took those little things, they picked up, trash and everything else, and maybe weeded the little flower beds out front and those kind of things to kind of repay their debt back to the school for having to time, efforts, and energy, staff costs and everything to retake the vandalism that they had put in place. So that's how we restored the justice. It wasn't necessarily, hey, you're getting punished and here's your consequence. It was hey, there are other ways to beautify the place here. And in a way that is a positive, not something that promotes violence, which is what your tagging was doing with your gang violence tags that you were putting up and so on. So it's those kind of things.
Okay, let's talk about budget and money a little. What would be your top tier budget priorities?
My top tier budget.
That's what it says, but I assume you're the superintendent working with the board. What are your top tier priorities?
Right. So for me, I would really want to invest more time in looking through the budget and the priorities that the district has in place. And from there, understanding the needs throughout the buildings as we walk through them, as we walk through the programming and other things. I clearly identified some things today as I was walking through, just from conversations that people had and ideas that they had. That's where that priority starts, is to get that information from people and to talk through it at our administrative level as well as the board level to then allocate the funds for what's needed. So for me, it's not really ever a personal priority or a personal list. Will I develop my own judgments as to how I would try to do that? Yes, but when I do that, I look at how can working this budget scenario and need versus this budget scenario need and that one, and thinking about the different funding mechanisms that work to try to get the best bang for our buck, because they're all needs that are out there and we can't afford all of them. I famously say all the time, you can afford to do anything you want to do, but you can't afford to do everything you want to do. So we have to prioritize. And if you hire me here, you'll hear me say that a lot. You can afford to do anything you want to do, but you can't afford to do everything you want to do. So let's prioritize. And that's how I prioritize the budget, is by asking those questions of you. What do we want to do? And what is the most important of all of them when we weigh them? And here's how we can fund them here or there to make a better financial plan for all of us to hopefully fit as many of those in the budget as we can, because we're not going to fit all of them.
Great segue. And under what conditions or circumstances might you consider a referendum?
What circumstances? We absolutely have to take care of our facilities, and we do not generate enough funds through our regular enrollment process to do that. No Wisconsin school district does anymore. And so all Wisconsin school districts at some point in time have to enter into the conversation about how do we get major equipment taken care of, major buildings taken care of, or other large purchases that wouldn't normally fit within our operating budget through the enrollment process and generating funds through enrollment. So that's one condition. The other condition that I would look at is if we're looking to do more or different, a lot of times that takes reinvestment into our community, into our facilities. Whether that's through a continuing referendum or others. I'll give you an example. In Richland School District, two things happened within my first year that led us to part of a referendum. One was, once I got there, we were talking about having to go one-to-one with technology and bringing in a position like technology coach or something else to make sure that that process happened well. So what we did is we studied technology funding within our school district. I found that we were budgeting about $60,000 annually for technology purposes back then, 7 years ago. But I also found out that we were spending over $400,000 annually for said technology purchases. We just called it something different. We would buy a piece of software that we used in the classroom, and we said, well, we're just going to say it's curriculum, when it's still a technology purchase. And it was taking away from other curriculum pieces that we needed to have. So I brought that information then to the public, and I said, here's what we want to do. We want to go one-to-one, okay? But
you can see in our budgeting, not only can we not afford to do one-to-one, but we really can't afford our day-to-day operations. And so we came up with a plan. The plan was to go for a $475,000 recurring referendum. Now, why did we pick recurring? Because we knew that those technology expenditures weren't going to go away ever. So it doesn't pay for us to say we're going to have a sunset in 3 years, because in 3 years, we're going to come back to you for that, plus more, plus the costs that are going to raise each year. So when we explained all that to the community, then they were supportive. Hopefully that answers the question.
Sounds like it,
Okay.
but I'm not the judge.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your current situation. Does your school board set goals each year? Okay, and if so, what do you believe was the most important goal this year, and did you achieve it?
So our school board does set goals each year. Sometimes it's saying we're going to continue on the 3-year plan of goals that we had. We set goals 3 years ago. We asked for them to sunset within 3 years, right? And we want to monitor our continued progress on those goals over the next 3 years, because sometimes you just can't get to where you want to be within 1 year. And so they do that. How do we monitor that? It depends. There's different pieces of data that we use, but we always use the data. We try to pull visualizations together, or testimony or what have you from our building principals or our students or parents, those kinds of things. But what we do is we reevaluate those goals quarterly if we can. So every once in a while, it goes a little bit past quarterly, but we still keep focus. We also review those goals in the place that they need to be. And where I say that is if it's something to, like our 5-year plan for facilities improvement, we discuss that in buildings and property. And then we bring the results from the review up to the board. If it's a curriculum issue, it goes through our curriculum committee, and we bring the results of that to the board. So that's how we do that.
Back to communication, and I'm going to read this descriptive. You have very busy days in school. Please explain how you manage to keep up with the many emails you probably receive from parents or community members, and what is your typical turnaround time in answering emails?
Okay, so I think everybody does it differently. I have a prioritization list based on the rule system within our email system. So for instance, at Richland Center, our URL is @richland.k12.wi.us. And so I set up a rule that says everything that has a .k12 or @richland.k12.wi.us within the email system, I forward it to this box. And I take care of that box first, because those are my people, right? Those are the ones who really need me right away. Then I have another box that says if it comes from dpi.wisconsin.gov, goes in this box. Those are important things I probably need to stay abreast of that I need to make sure that I can handle. So I organize it a lot through inbox, and I organize my responses based upon a lot of that. So I try to respond within a day or two of an email, and even if that response is I'm looking for more information, I'm letting you know I'm looking for more information. If you don't hear from me in a week, remember I'm very busy. Will you send me a reminder? People are very responsive to that because they were heard. They know that you're looking, and they know that you may need a reminder. And so I found that works well. And then if I have other places out there that I know it's like, okay, that's a vendor, they can wait a week, then the vendor waits a week. Because I need to make sure I prioritize the content as well as the sender in how I do that. So.
Thanks.
Yeah.
A controversial hot topic. CRT, critical race theory, is a very hot topic right now. Briefly, what are your thoughts as it relates to the Watertown School District?
Yeah, so, I know that may be a hot topic here. It hasn't been in our region. It's not because we don't have people on either side of the issue. It's just people are focused on other things, moving the school district forward. So I guess I would need more information about that topic here and how people feel about it. Just like any other topic. I don't care if it's CRT or how we spray chemicals to take care of dandelions. Okay, if that's an issue, I need to hear more. I need to hear more from our constituents or people in our community. What's the what is having people have some discussion about it. And then how I usually go about that is to talk about here's what you're hearing or seeing. And I want to let's start with the facts first. Here's what actually happens. It may jive with what you saw or heard, it may not. But here are the facts. And I try to share with them where we got the facts or how or why that is. Because a lot of times the controversy comes around not really knowing. One that hit us really big this last year, and you probably heard of it too, was the community was just livid. They thought we had litter boxes in the restroom. For students who chose to identify as feline, and I can't remember what the other topic or other nomenclature was, but that they would then use the litter box instead of our swimming facilities. And I'm like, absolutely, that is not the case. You can come and you can walk through our restrooms. We don't keep litter boxes. And if you come up and you walk through, it's probably a senior prank because we don't do that. We have normal toileting facilities and everything else. But then, once people understood like, oh, okay, maybe that was just a thing that went around on Facebook, they understood. But it was like, every day, at least 5-10 people calling me and saying, what are you doing with these kids up there? I'm like, just want. So then we started being proactive with the communication. Listen, there are not litter boxes out here, and those kind of things. So a lot of it is just that. And so for me, whether it's CRT or whatever else, I want to hear what the issue is. I want to make sure that I tell the facts as to what is really happening. And then if we want to have a change, then it's my job to bring the issue to the school board to say, here's some discussion topics that are out there. If they don't bring it to me first, and a lot of times that happens that way, the school board gets involved and they bring me the issue and say, hey, what's this? And answer them the same way. Well, here's the facts that I know of so far, but if we want to change, or if we want to do something else, or we want to have this become a bigger topic, we can. We had a bigger topic issue in our school district. It was around bullying, right? And a lot of people were just livid. They thought we weren't doing enough and everything. So we had 6 community-wide forums over 4.5 months to hear from people. What's your issue with bullying? What are you hearing or seeing? Because it might be not necessarily what we're hearing or seeing. What would you like to see happen? And then that helped us and informed us in writing a really good policy and finding a different way to deal with that. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's what we've done.
I'm going to continue on the touchy topic category since you're warmed up for it.
Okay.
And I'll just preface, all school districts went through some very tough years the last 2 years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So parents and community members in this community signed petitions, spoke out at school board meetings to send our kids back full-time, face-to-face and out of masks,
Sure.
not unlike many other school districts. What are your thoughts on COVID mitigation, provided that we don't have a major spread in our schools? I'm assuming that means going forward.
Going
What are
forward?
your thoughts?
Right. Well, I would say going forward, most school districts, if it's anything like my experience over the last 2 years, is most school districts have mostly it pretty well figured out, unless a new variant comes and we get that spike again. Even if we have that spike again, we at least remember what we had in place during some of that as a starter. But my question would be then, what didn't go well during our last spike that we really need to work on and fix? And let's have a plan for that. So that way, if the spike happens, we can take care of it. At the Richland School District, we've started having some of those conversations in case, and I hope it doesn't happen again, but in case it does, we need to have some communication here in Watertown about what went well, what didn't, what did parents like, what didn't they like, and then try to come up with a strategy, and I will tell you that strategy may work and it may not. Everything, is different. And what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow, but at least we'll have a better starting point than what we have right now.
I'm going to add this, with all of the challenges over the last 2 years, how will you address the mental health needs of our students?
Yeah, oh, that's a question. Yeah, people come at that many different directions. And I think like a lot of other things that have happened through schools, this becomes a new discussion as to how far do services go for students? What is the school responsible for? And it does seem as though that's a service that many people in the federal government, the state government, and even local governments are saying needs to be addressed in concert with education and learning and not in opposition to it. Let me explain that to you. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? In order to get to a place of learning or self-actualization, you need to have your safety met first. And we've always viewed safety as, are you well fed, which didn't used to be the school's responsibility, but now is, right? Are you hurt, which didn't used to be the school's responsibility much, but you see more and more nursing facilities, actual PAs, dentists coming in to do fillings into schools. So it's become more part of the school work. And now we're talking about mental health, right? As another safety feature for kids. Anxiety has gone through the roof on kids for a couple of reasons. One, Omicron and COVID and the displacement of security within the day-to-day school. What I mean by that is the regular, humans love to have pattern, right? You have it in your everyday life. You get up, you go to work, you have a certain route you travel to work, maybe even a stop at the Quick Trip or somewhere else. And you do those things on a pattern basis just about every day. Even a lot of the meetings you have on the first Monday of every month or whatever it is, right? Just because it's easier. When you don't have that, that caused problems for not only our students, but our staff and our families, because when COVID hit, you didn't have the pattern to rely on anymore. So that caused a lot of anxiety. When it causes anxiety to youth, they don't have what that is, that normalcy to go back to. As adults, we do, right? When we get through this, we're just gonna go back to normal. And how many times have you heard, we can't wait till we get back to normal, right? Well, my child, who is a first grader going into second grade, right? 4K year got cut short. Kindergarten year was in and outs. And this last year was full of a lot of sub in and outs from teacher subs and other things, right? Doesn't have normal to understand in his realm of what schooling is yet. Hasn't had a normal year. And even our older students who are now juniors didn't really have a normal freshman year. So that produces a lot of anxiety, right? And mental health issues. And so it's going to be some years before we can work through that and get to a realized normal that kids can get back to. So that's why we're hearing a lot of screaming about, we need to help mental health in the school. It can't be just, well, you're having problems, go see somebody. Why? Because the problems are in their daily, everyday life. And again, that goes back to research with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what a student needs to be self-actualized and have proper learning. And if we can, even if it's in a short run, help put those Band-Aids in place, then we take that on as a school. If it becomes a long-lasting thing that we think is good, like we need to feed students who don't get normally fed, and we are starting to use snack pack for backpack programs to extend food into the weekend time. I mean, schools are doing that, right? Schools have in the past not done that. But now it's getting even commonplace where, we put a little backpack in the locker and they take their backpack and the other backpack home and they bring back the empty backpack that had food in it, right? Because we're taking care of our community. So I would say, for mental health, having an open mind and talking about how it's going to support our learners, is that a good thing or not? And do we want to take that on? And that has to be a community decision. You can't just, just sit there. So that's where I would come from.
And I'm gonna add this one, and then we've got three that really are about you and your leadership.
Okay.
But this one I think goes with it, with all the challenges again over the past 2 years. How do you address the increased learning gaps in a time of also constrained, limited budgets?
Yeah. Well, we do that the way professional educators do. We make sure that we keep track of each student. Each student is an individual in our eyes. I know we have a whole classroom or a whole grade or, whole system of students here. But really when it comes down to it, you ask any teacher, they know for sure every child that they come in contact with each day, where their performance level is, them as a learner, their needs moving forward. I get pushback on this from some parents sometimes when I say it, but I even know this about my own child. My child's teacher knows my child as a learner way better than I do. Why? Because they have him more waking hours in the day than I do. They spend their time developing that child on my behalf for me. And so what I try to do is I try to remember that, and I try to support them because they are the professionals who learned how to do that, who know the ins and outs of my child, and they will find a way to reach that gap. We just have to keep supporting them until they can. And then from a curriculum instruction standpoint, I have to make sure that they have the appropriate materials, they have the appropriate time, they have appropriate professional development, that they form connections with each other as a group so that when the student, my child, is not within their classroom, but within others' classrooms, that they can take care of him as a whole group and within a structure that's supportive, and make sure I keep the lights on, a roof over their head, those kind of things. So how are we going to close the gaps? It's by doing all of that. But it first has to start with trusting in our professionals who know our children's learning way better than we do.
Great, thank you. So coming from the Richland Center community, which is a small town community where everyone knows everyone, what impact do you feel you had on that district? And what kind of grade do you think that community would give you?
Oh, it depends on who you talk to. And that'll be the same here. Some people will give me an F and some people will give me an A. What kind of impact have I had? Well, I can share only through metrics because, I'm a data person and I like to go back to that. When I was hired in the Richland School District, our fund balance was at 11%. I was told within the first 3 months of my hire that we drastically needed to go to a referendum. That was that referendum I referenced to earlier. The recurring part was part of that, but we also had a buildings part and a site safety and security part. All 3 questions passed. The borrowing part for the physical nature stuff of the site safety security, as well as the roofing and everything else, that came to 8-point-some million. And it was like 8.7 million. And then we went from passage to getting the work done. And we found out that getting some of the work done was going to be way over budget. And so we had to cut some things out of the budget. And we did, and we moved forward. But that probably wasn't communicated out as well as it should have been. That's a learning issue that I found, as well as our board, because as we tried to do future referendum, a lot of that discussion came up. Well, I thought we did the roofs in the last referendum. What happened? I thought we were supposed to take care of some of this, ventilating in the last referendum. What happened? And so then we had to kind of go back and talk about, here's what it is. And no, there's no absconding with money. We get audited every year. Here's our auditor. If you want to give them a call and talk about the audit paper, if you want to come review the audit, that's fine. We'll walk you through that in our business official will, those kind of things. But we were able to do some things with that money. Fast forward, we are now at a 24% fund balance in our school district. We don't have to short-term borrow for money. Short-term borrowing was costing us about $90,000 a year. We transitioned that into curriculum dollars. We realigned our administrative work. We transitioned from a 5-building model to a 3-building model to be more efficient. That made us or helped us utilize the staffing from those other buildings that were, considered surplus staffing once we closed the building, right? I said, we don't have surplus staff. We have the right size staff, but the wrong amount of buildings. And we were able to fill in gaps that we had cut over the years. So a guidance counselor that we cut at the high school, we took one of the elementaries that were closing counselor, and we put that at the high school, and so on. Middle school librarian was cut. We took the other elementary librarian, we moved them in, those kinds of things that we did. So did I have an impact? Yes, as a part of the whole, as a part of an administrative team and as part of a board, as part of the community, I had a great impact over the last 7 years. Did that come with some strife, and would some people give me a failing score? Maybe. But there are a lot of people who support me, support the board and the school district, and they would give us a really great score.
I'm going to probably combine these last two, because I think it'll lead into your wrap up.
Okay.
So I'll put these together, those of you that are listening for your questions. And I'll do that right after this question. How might you go about holding staff and administrators accountable when they are not fulfilling their responsibilities as outlined in their job descriptions?
Okay. Well, that's the part of the job that gets, it's the not so glitzy part of the job, right? When you have to make sure that you're looking at somebody who you respect for many reasons, but maybe they did something inappropriate. I try to give chances because I don't believe that there's truly evildoers in school. And if there are, we get rid of them right away. And it's easy to, because it's just so easy when like somebody did something so egregious, you have to take care of that issue, right? I had 2 very publicized issues this last year within our local community. One is a teacher who is a really good teacher, and I can say that because I've seen him teach, and the way he reaches out to kids and the way he connects with them was good. But a lot of the community didn't see the other things that weren't happening correctly, following up policies and procedures. When there was an issue that that person maybe was fighting for, didn't use the communication systems within the district and actually went outside the district, or used access to certain information that they weren't allowed to, which is against FERPA or illegal, to try to forward their cause. We had to non-renew that teacher. And that became a huge community issue, because how could you, do that with such a popular, such a great teacher? And it's hard because you as an administrator know both sides of the story, and you have to make a call. I'm not afraid to make the call, especially when I know all of the facts. The thing about the situation is that there was enough public outcry that we had to do the balancing test. What I mean by that is the protection of the individual's rights to keep that hiring information private versus the community's will or need to know about what really happened, and holding me accountable and the board accountable for our decisions that we made. And I think once the community saw the information that came out, most of them were like, oh yeah, okay, we understand now. But there still are some people who care about that person and respect that person, just like I do, who want to support them. Again, that's where it has to be a non-glitzy part. My outlook is always, how can we try to use that so it's the best of the situation? Second situation I had to deal with was we had a middle school principal, and again, this is public knowledge, so it's not me going against our privacy for our individual. A middle school principal, which is now our intermediate school principal this year, ended up getting into a relationship with his assistant. And they were meeting during the day in the basement of the school. That's hard. because we're talking about a man who is a very good leader, who had a very much support of his staff. And even when staff found out, they were like, can't you just find a way to just help him through that and make this happen? And I'm like, can't. They were basically stealing from the school district an hour, hour and a half of their salary each day for the last however many days. And you know, that becomes a difficult thing, because when you get right down to it, that means also that they weren't supporting you or the students. And remember, when I say we take care of the most valuable asset that our families have, I take that really, really not very lightly at all. And so when those things happen, I have to make a call. I give the board all the information that I can so that they can decide whether or not they uphold my recommendation. And for the most part, they have.
I'm going to combine these because I
Okay.
think there will be a great wrap up, but feel free to add if
Sounds good.
you're so inclined. Why do you want to work in Watertown?
Okay.
What are your priorities in coming here? And what would you say is the #1 most important attribute you bring as a leader?
Boy.
So why here, your priorities?
Self-deprecating humor. No.
And your best attributes, leadership attributes.
So I think my strongest leadership attribute is I truly am a very collaborative person. And I try to seek the answers from as much data or as much involvement as I can get. Now, that doesn't mean I can meet with everybody all the time, because we would never get anything done. But I am very collaborative. You know, I try to, you know, one of my strengths through the Strength Finder is arranger. I arrange the people or arrange the budgets or what. I try to get the best I can from all of those resources, right? To make a decision or to further us. So that's me as a person. I also operate out of a place of high integrity. You know, I try to really make sure that I mean, that's a core of mine. And so, you know, what are the priorities coming here? Well, I'm looking for a place where my children can grow. And there's a lot of opportunities. I've seen them throughout your programming here. And there's a willingness from this community that I understand that's willing to grow those opportunities for our students. And I'm not saying Richland doesn't have that, but you know, Richland is a great small town, but they aren't growing. They're shrinking rapidly, and we're having to cut programs and deal with those things. And I know that there's some declining enrollment issues here, but I also see great opportunities for my family, especially for my children here. It's situated in a great area. My wife and I grew up in La Crosse, which is a bigger city. I like a lot of things that a bigger city has, but I also like living in a small town. So one of the reasons that brought me to Richland Center was it was a nice small town where I get to know my neighbors and I get to know people. And everywhere you go, you could say hi to at least 5 people, because I like people. And so I say hi to people. Whereas, you know, in a school district the size of La Crosse or so on, you know, sometimes you can get lost in the bigness of it. So it's just the right size and located near enough of those places that we can go get what we want, but we can come back to our community. And it's still a big enough community where my kids can get what they need. So that's what's bringing me here. Hopefully, I've introduced myself to you through this forum as well as I could. And hopefully you give me a chance to think about leading this school district and see where we can go together. And if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you. I would suggest, you know, just sending me an email to my school address, and then I'd give you a personal phone number or address from there forward. So.
Other last minute questions? If not, we'll thank everybody for attending tonight in person as well as online. We were able to ask all of the questions by combining a couple of them. So I hope your voice was heard. I hope you feel satisfied. And join me, please, in thanking Dr. Burke, please, for being with us tonight. That was an hour on the hot seat. So take a breath and
It was, it got
mingle.
warm up
Now
here,
you
so I had
can
to take my
move.
coat off.
Now you can move, right? Is that true? You have permission to leave your X marks the spot. Please go ahead.
Ooh.
Thanks, everybody.